Hello and welcome to our webinar today. I'm pleased to host you all for what will be an informative discussion on the AWS migration priorities in a post-pandemic world. Before I get started, I just wanted to give a few housekeeping rules. So all attendees have been muted. The session is being recorded and will be made available afterwards for offline viewing. If you have any questions during the session, I encourage you to post those in the chat window, and we'll try and get those if time allows at the end of the session. And most importantly, we would like to get your feedback. Feedback's vitally important for us, both on the content of the webinar, but also to understand where customers are in their migration journeys. So after the event, there'll be a short survey of a handful of questions. We would appreciate if you could spend a short moment just completing those. So hello, my name is Ian Hutchinson. I'm the AWS Strategic Alliance Lead at SoftwareONE. I'm joined today by two great speakers who are participating in this webinar, Mary and McDaniel and Gordon Davey. Mary, if you'd like to say hello, quick introduction.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thanks, guys, for joining today. As Ian said, Mary McDaniel, I'm with AWS. I lead the EMEA Migration and Modernization Specialty Practice, and we're part of our ProServe organization that's been helping many customers in a migration journey. I've been with AWS 5.5 years, and in that time, worked with many customers on their migration and modernization journey.
Great, thank you. And Gordon?
Yeah, hi there everyone. My name is Gordon Davey. I'm the Global Business Owner for Cloud Services here at SoftwareONE. I joined around about 6 months ago to lead this business unit within the company. Before that, I've had a number of different roles, both client side and vendor side, focused on cloud for the last 10 or 11 years.
Great, thanks, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. So as we get started, I think we're going to go through the agenda today. It's a quick recap of what the market has seen over the last 12 to 15 months in this pandemic situation. We're going to review how customers can move from more of a reactive approach in 2020 and into a more proactive cloud migration strategy. And we're going to have a debate around which is the best route and strategy of dealing with migration. Should you rehost, modernize, and then some recommendations of how we get started as we move into public cloud and AWS. So one thing's quite clear is that COVID-19 and the pandemic's really forced IT organizations to react quite considerably in the last 12 months from what was probably their standard business plan and IT strategy in 2020. There's the three main trends that I've seen that IT has been asked to focus on, which is really, well, first of all, preserving cash and optimizing IT costs to help businesses survive in what is inevitably being challenging times. The second is having an IT organization that's able to react quickly and then support and secure a remote workforce, lots of people working from home. And then thirdly, building resilience and enabling business continuity. People have not been able to go into offices, workplaces. How do they maintain uptime of their applications in a traditional data center environment? All challenges that 2 or 3 years ago would have been unthought of. So what's really been happening is there's this trend in the marketplace where workloads have been moving to public cloud to address all of those examples. And specifically, what Gartner have identified is that public cloud spending is just growing, and it's continued to forecast to grow in 2021 by over 18%. We've also seen that lots of organizations that have used the pandemic as an enabler to get to cloud is actually proving to be of business value, and they're actually planning to increase their spend during 2021 and beyond. And that move to public cloud is definitely there, and we're seeing IDC calling out that most organizations, over 90%, will have a mixture of public and private clouds to go into that hybrid estate. And there's different ways of dealing that, different products and services. And finally, organizations are not just moving to cloud and using it as a standard infrastructure as a service. They're actually starting to modernize, and there's been a distinct growth in platform level services, platform as a service, as we've seen over the last 12 months. So with that in mind, Mary, I'd just like to get the AWS perspective on how has AWS seen the move to public cloud, and specifically to AWS in the last year, and what are the benefits that customers are getting from that migration to cloud?
Yeah, absolutely, Ian. So, as the past 12 months have really changed much of our lives, as Gartner looks at the forecast, as Ian mentioned, we definitely see customers are moving, from a reactive approach to more of a proactive, thoughtful approach in going to the cloud. And really, it's how do you react as our ways of working have changed, our customer demand has changed. We need to be able to meet that demand. If you think about the online grocery delivery, once the pandemic hit and we weren't going out to stores, all of a sudden, I know many a website crashed when you were trying to place grocery orders. And so that's definitely an industry that didn't see this coming and really needs that resiliency and the ability to scale quickly. And also in other industries like the travel, how do you reduce scale? You don't need that capacity now. People aren't traveling. So, cloud's really become one of these business changers where you can react more to these kinds of events that you never know when they're going to show up.
Yeah, and I think from my side as well, Ian, it was really interesting seeing the trends throughout the last year. I think, and many of us expected as we've begun to realise what was happening, that all the trends would be the way, that adoption would slow down as companies really hunkered down and tried to weather the storm. And as the numbers on the screen there, and we've seen in reality show, it was the opposite when it came to cloud adoption, and it really bucked the trend. We saw increases, and something that was unusual for me was the top left-hand one there about end user spending. I think we can all understand that. We all understand that as people moved organizations moved their people to home working, there was going to be that uptick in end user cloud services. But the more surprising side for me was actually the infrastructure side. So core infrastructure services growing by even more in some cases, and companies really throwing into their cloud migration heavily. And I think, as Mary said, that's very much to do with the flexibility the cloud provides and allows to scale up and down as needed. I did see an interesting post on social media just the other day, and it was kind of posted as a survey. Who's in your organization has been the most influential driver of cloud adoption? Your CTO, option A; your CIO, option B; or COVID-19, option C. And the graph is right up with COVID-19. So it really has been an instigator of change in many, many organizations.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've spoken to a few customers myself over the last year or so, and I think they've had to react really quickly. But I guess reacting quickly and acting at speed, cloud enables that. The agility benefits are obviously clear, but that doesn't come without its risks, Mary. And I guess reacting at speed means you don't have time to put thought into it, adopt best practice, and there might be customers out there who've got concerns about whether they've done things right. Have you got any thoughts about how they should address that?
Yeah, absolutely. When AWS really started working with customers in the cloud, we developed what we call the well-architected framework, and its really purpose is to help architects build secure, high-performing, resilient, and efficient infrastructure in the cloud. And one of the things that's really important in what we do in that is it's not just the technology or the platform, it's really based on pillars of operational resiliency, security, reliability, performance, and definitely cost optimization. As many customers are looking to move to the cloud, cost optimization is a really key factor there. And what we find is customers that have started that journey, even if you have workloads running today, you can leverage the well-architected framework review to give you a consistent approach, determine where you need to make changes, and how do you assess that so that you can scale over time.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Mary, you mentioned those two factors really bring together the kind of well-architected side and the cost side. The kind of industry trend that's really capturing all of that today is FinOps. And at SoftwareONE, we are very closely linked with the FinOps Foundation and really beginning to drive that perspective of how can you bring together all of those elements at that operational excellence side and make sure you're doing things well, taking into account all of those factors that become part of well architected, and then your cost management perspective, and not just to do with reducing costs either, but to make sure every dollar you're spending is being spent in its most effective way, and potentially even making money for you rather than just looking at cost savings. So yeah, hugely important.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the advice. So as we move into more of an opportunity to put our head above the water and be a bit more thoughtful, as you said earlier, Mary, I guess moving from reactive to proactive, there's a number of drivers that I know you wanted to highlight that are still causing customers to move to the cloud. So maybe if you just want to give us some perspectives on those reasons, that would be great to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a whole variety of reasons why customers go to the cloud, but I really think what as we've changed from this reactive to proactive, it's still cost reduction. People are always going to look to the cloud to be cost reduction, but I think looking at security, operational resiliency, as you find having less staff or your staff unable to come to the office, you really need to trust your infrastructure to do what it needs, and so cloud really gives you those benefits. And then also the agility. How do you make your staff more productive? Many customers have had to work, you have to work with less staff. So how can you build that staff agility that really helps you build? And so those are some of the key ones we see. And I will talk on digital transformation just a moment, because I think the history of cloud tend to be more about the rehost and all that. And I do think customers are thinking more about how do they make this transformation to their business.
Yeah, so I would probably dive into the security and operational resilience part of this slide here, because cost reduction, as you said, Mary, everyone kind of links move to cloud with cost reduction. And that often does happen, not always, but as I was alluding to earlier in that FinOps reference, it's often more about making money and making your business more secure and stable. We were working with a customer called Hunter in Latin America, actually, and their real issue was site stability, making sure they had the right kind of services available in a reliable way for their customers, but also gaining visibility into their platform and understanding what was working well and what wasn't. And while all of that could have been built out in their on-prem environment, we realized it was going to be much quicker and simpler to do that in cloud for them. And we helped them in that cloud migration, modernizing as they went, moving much more to kind of Lambda functions and cloud native technologies. And has given them a hugely improved security and resilience posture, which is what they were aiming for. But as a side effect, has also got them a huge cost reduction as well. So, that wasn't what they were aiming for, that wasn't what they were coming into, but they got that as a side benefit. So it's not always the primary driver, but it's generally always a side benefit as well.
Yeah. I guess optimization of using cloud always plays into that modernization and digital transformation elements. And I think, Mary, I think CIOs are going to be looking for, how can they be more strategic and get back to being a revenue earner and enabler of their business now, rather than just reacting quickly to keep the lights on this year. Would you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the ways that AWS and partners like yourself really are helping customers focus on what's the business outcome. It's not a technology problem. It's really how do you transform your business and reach those outcomes. So I do think that will continue to be a major driver as we help customers in this journey.
Great. Yeah. So Gordon, I think we mentioned some workloads, but what workloads do you see being moved predominantly in 2021 and beyond as customers become more comfortable with using the cloud?
Yeah, it's interesting. Historically, and I've been working in cloud for many years. You roll back 5-8 years, and everybody was talking about cloud. It was only really going to be used for dev test and get your dev test workloads in there, and we've seen that slowly evolve, and lots of companies now are got their production workloads or business critical workloads in there, and COVID-19 seems to have kind of thrown that forward even further. We're seeing now a lot of companies really looking seriously at those business critical applications, many times applications that even a couple of years ago many organizations wouldn't have considered for the cloud, like their core SAP systems, their ERP platforms. And that's something that we've definitely specialized in. We have a practice that focuses entirely on helping companies with SAP type and critical workloads and moving them into public cloud platforms. And we're seeing a huge increase in the demand there that just wasn't there 12 or 18 months ago. So yeah, that's really interesting and exciting to see.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the perspective. And I guess if you just want to change tack slightly, I guess we've talked a little bit about staff and the ability to service cloud platforms, but the challenge of operating in the cloud is not necessarily the same as operating an on-premise data center. I know you've come from a customer previously before joining SoftwareONE, and I guess being on the other side of the fence, it's how do you manage and run up applications in the cloud you've got a good view on. Maybe if you want to give some advice on that perspective, please.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely, if anything, the bigger challenge. I often say the technology part is the easy part. Working out what your architecture is going to be for your applications and moving them to cloud in many ways is the simpler aspect. Really changing your organization and the cultural approach to cloud can be much more difficult. And there's many aspects to that, from your operating model right through to that financial side we're talking about. And FinOps, again, on that same topic, is really about helping your financial organization understand how an operational cost model works, rather than that kind of CapEx model, and how they can budget for that and how they can account for that. But on the more operational side, that transformation can be difficult. We've worked with a lot of organizations who maybe haven't got their core IT team ready tomorrow to just jump and start using cloud. They're maybe more used to using traditional on-prem technologies. We would, of course, encourage you to be upskilling your organization as quickly as possible, to be making use of those newer technologies, but at the same time, getting that right balance of using managed service partners where appropriate. Gartner has been talking about many years about that bimodal approach, where you have two different approaches to on-prem and more modern applications in the cloud. And a good way of doing that can be to make use of a managed service partner that can help you make that jump and then bring your staff up to speed. So there's no one answer that fits everyone. It's one size fits all. That's never the case. But yeah, that's definitely a key factor to consider as part of your cloud migration journey.
One thing I'd like to add that I'm seeing customers look at today really is the cost of people to operate. Traditionally it's been a lot about the hardware and how do we operate and that, but I'm seeing customers want to use, be very thoughtful about what's the people cost. Do I need as many people? Do I change what my people do? As we talk about that organizational transformation, that's another key part of cost, I think, that sometimes isn't thought about until you start to really look at how can you improve your overall business case as part of your migration journey.
I think that's a great point, Mary. And it's probably one of the areas that the big cloud vendors like yourselves were maybe criticized for at the start. You looked at the TCO models that were comparing the cost of on-prem and the cloud, and everybody thought it was hugely skewed because there was all this cost of people on-prem and that maybe wasn't factored into cloud. And it's only when you get into cloud and you realize how automated lots of it is that you realize you really need to factor in those to have a proper cost comparison. So yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, and actually to give people a career path and actually develop and as they learn new skills and actually become more useful to the business than just doing operational activities, I think is quite a key of cloud as well.
Yeah, I mean, for years and years, I've seen organizations pushing back against cloud from within their technology teams because they were almost scared and didn't want to adopt cloud, didn't want to change. Because they were scared that there was no job for them after they'd done the cloud migration, and that's the furthest from the truth. And it's really giving people much more fulfilling and influential jobs as they move to the more value-add areas of the business, rather than just the mundane day-to-day operational tasks that they've had to do themselves on-prem.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, I'll move us on to our next topic. I know when we were planning the discussion on the webinar previously, one of the key topics we were talking about was the discussion around rehosting versus refactoring. And yeah, it's just struggling with the slides there for a moment, everyone. But Mary, I think you had some interesting perspectives on, yeah, should a customer rehost or modernize?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to think about here, right? If you look at the time continuum, right, a rehost is going to be much faster. You're going to get, to the cloud sooner, but the cost is going to be less, which is a benefit. But are you really getting the full value you're looking at? And if we think about additional ways for cost savings, especially in the replatform, where you look to move off licensed databases to more open source, maybe move to more, as we talked about the people costs, right? If you move off your traditional databases to maybe a managed database like RDS, you're able to reduce those costs and then give people a little more fulfilling jobs. I've talked to several DBAs in my time with AWS where they're kind of afraid of the managed database, and once they realize they don't have to patch on the weekends, they are quite excited about that change in their job. So it does have a really positive effect, and it does help the operations as well. And there again, additional cost savings. There again, a little more effort. And then the refactor really is, where you really see, the huge benefits of going more cloud native, moving to serverless and other capabilities like that. What I do see customers doing is looking at their application portfolio, and as they look at the normal mapping of what I'm going to do, I also suggest they think about the value of the apps. What does it do for your business? Is this a critical app that helps you build customer demand? It helps you service your customers, which grows your revenue. And for those cases, you may want to consider those very quickly into a refactor approach, because that's going to really provide, that longer term benefit for you, and it's worth investing in. Things that aren't that important to your business, they just run, you have to have them, just rehost those and move over. Another way I see customers doing this a bit is starting that journey to the cloud and really looking at moving everything in a rehost, maybe a replatform type strategy, and using the savings that come out of that to help then fund the refactoring side. So you can look at different ways where you can, look at and so I think customers need to look at the whole portfolio and really rationalize the apps and the value and make decisions based on long-term strategies, and not just quickly go, okay, there's 100 apps and here's what I'm going to do, but be very thoughtful in the process, which really will give you more long-term value.
Yeah, I can completely agree, Mary. And the whole emphasis of this webinar around moving more towards a proactive approach rather than reactive is really, it should be focused on what you were saying there. I've seen a number of organisations that have gone very polar one way or the other. That they've decided they want to refactor everything because refactor's best. And then they've just got bogged down in this massive timeline of trying to analyze every single application and work out how to refactor it and move it to cloud native technologies, and it really slows down everything. And then organizations at the other end of the spectrum that have just gone, yep, we want to just rehost and throw everything in, and then they don't see the cost and efficiency benefits that they would have got from maybe replatforming or refactoring applications. A much more realistic view is to look at it on a per workload basis, as you said, and understand which of your applications are great candidates for refactoring. They're maybe highly business critical, that they really are going to be driving a core part of your business, and therefore improving the way they operate is going to be hugely beneficial to you. Improving the security of them, the operational resilience is going to be hugely beneficial. But those lower value applications, or the ones that maybe have some kind of technical debt, absolutely rehost them. And like you said, that can be a stage one part of the process. That the cloud can actually enable a number of different migration strategies, like the strangler approach, for example, where actually having your application in the cloud to start with, and then beginning to break off various chunks of the code of that and bring it down into microservices. It can be done on-prem, but it's actually much easier and more flexible to do that in the cloud. So that two-stage approach really works well. So again, it's not a one-size-fits-all for even per organization. It's looking at your workloads and identifying the right approach.
One other thing that's often missed sometimes, I think, is, but one thing I think is often missed is, in our R is kind of the retire component. Over time, companies have acquired other companies. There's a lot of extra applications, and sometimes you can find some really interesting approaches to seeing what you have and retiring things that you don't use anymore, or very limited use or internal use only. And so that can also get you some quick benefits without a lot of work in your overall migration strategy.
It's amazing how many companies are still running workloads that they don't really know what they're for, and everybody's afraid to turn it off because they're not sure if somebody else is using it, and it just sits there running. So yeah, no names will be provided, but I've definitely come across that in the past.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. I think the key takeaway here is migration is a journey, and it's part of it is pre-hosting, and then figuring out what you need to do to improve that application on a case-by-case basis. So if we consider that migration as a journey, Mary, I know this is a slide that we both subscribe to it at SoftwareONE and AWS. About having this phased approach. Maybe you want to take us through this structure.
Absolutely. I think I could do this in my sleep some days. Yeah. So through our time of working with customers, AWS created this migration acceleration journey, which really takes us through the phases, and it's evolved over time as we've learned more. We really take the input from our customers and how we see migrations work, and our partners as well, like SoftwareONE, to be able to improve this. And we've talked a lot about that front end part of the journey, this assess phase, where we're looking at the TCO, we're looking at the applications, we're determining our migration readiness, and then immersing ourselves into the cloud. And what does that look like? And really, we look at this phase as creating your case for change. What are you going to do? Why are you doing it? There again, a lot of that thoughtful approach we've talked about of how you look at your cloud journey really starts to happen here, and starts to build your executive vision. What's the reason we're doing this? We're not moving to cloud because we want to do it. We're probably moving to cloud because there's a compelling reason. And so here's really where you're focusing on that. And then as you get into the journey, we really focus on what we call building the readiness of experiences. So, we don't do this in a waterfall approach, where we really get started with our customers looking at discovery, looking at skills. We talked about upskilling people, how this gives them more new, fulfilling roles. And that's a really key part of a migration, is what do you do with your people and how do they get prepared for this new world? Platform, operating model. I think Gordon will talk a little more about operating model. But in there again, thinking about security and all those pieces. And really what we end up in this kind of phase, and it runs about 16 weeks or so, we look to move some apps. So at the end of this, you've kind of got what I call a quick start, where we have a platform, we know how to run, we know how our people are going to react, and we're going to actually put workloads in the cloud and start operating them, which then gives you a whole lot of experience, and that moves into this next phase where we're starting to accelerate. And here we're really looking at, how fast can we migrate or modernize? How do we operate? And then how do we continue to make that more efficient? So it's really a path very well worn by our customers who have done this, and it really helps you get started and scale quickly.
And Gordon, I think the key thing I find is how do customers get prepared for this? And I think I look back at that first assessment stage, and migration readiness assessment sounds to be a key part of that phase. So maybe if you want to just expand on that for us a bit, please.
Yeah, sure. As in most things in life, planning is absolutely critical to get the most out of any cloud journey. I've been talking to customers about cloud readiness assessments for many years, and go back again 5 or 10 years, and it was a very basic conversation. There's now a much better understanding of what it takes for an organization to transform a proper enterprise organization to be cloud native and to really adopt these technologies. Mary touched on a lot of those factors, and it's everything from understanding your application estate, like we talked about in the last section there, and getting the right technology, right through to the operational side of making sure your teams and staff understand how to operate, can control the costs, and we've got that end-to-end perspective. It can also be looking at your technology as well, and a lot of the technical debt you've got there. And we've touched on it briefly, but we've worked with a number of customers where a lot of this whole phase has been funded just by the benefits they've seen by getting rid of a lot of that technical debt, whether that's legacy databases. We've got another big customer in LATAM again, actually, a group called Transoceana, who they managed to get rid of a lot of their legacy database technology, moved to native database technology, and the cost saving in that was enormous. That was all uncovered during that initial assessment phase as being an opportunity, and we're able to then plan that properly and design. And that flows down into everything for that workload, from the architectural design right to the operating model for that design, because as Mary said, DBAs are still needed, but their role changes, and how they operate and maintain that going forward is hugely different. And then there's also the aspect of moving to more of a DevOps approach, which for many traditional on-prem teams is something that's very foreign to them, that they're not familiar with that. But really being able to adopt that kind of DevOps operating model, getting rid of the silos, and really automating a lot of the process, is what instills the higher levels of operational resilience, of security, of quicker iteration times for their application. It changes a lot in the way that they operate, but again, helping them on that journey is key, and it needs to be planned. So it's all part of the same story.
Yeah, DevSecOps. Great. And Mary, I think if we look at the business case of moving to cloud, I guess there's some big ticket items that customers are already spending money on, licensing, hardware, all of that, feeds into TCO. I know you've got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big things is customers are really looking at the different events, and one of them is their annual licensing, or what time frame you're on. If you look at the license you're paying for your databases, sometimes even your development platforms, this part of this analysis is a good opportunity to reevaluate that. Do you want to continue that licensing structure? And so we have programs, as you do as well, that can help you assess your licenses and determine what's the best approach going forward. How do you get that? And in some cases, that, especially if it's at the time of a licensing event, it's immediate savings. You didn't have to do a lot, and you actually see those savings. So it's really a key part. Then, as we talked about the retire and repurchase, right, this is a great opportunity to maybe look at, maybe you've got old on-prem apps and there's a better SaaS cloud solution that you could move to. A good example is some people move to on-prem HR systems to something like a Workday, where now that's all cloud-based. And so now you've reduced operating costs, you've reduced a whole lot of other things, and you really don't have to spend the time doing that. So really, the looking at the TCO and looking at what you can do in your operating environment and what you can do with your applications, really helps you, give more insight into that business case. And as we talked earlier, understand what you can do early to help fund the program really helps you along the way in the journey, not feel like this is a major OpEx expense to complete this. So you can start to see the savings as you go along and not wait till the end.
Yeah, great. And Gordon, I know if I think back into my days as an IT engineer and stuff, I used to go into data center tracing cables and figuring out which server it was plugged into. There must be better ways of doing that now. So, how do you do that rapid discovery?
No, I mean, I think still just pulling the power plug in a server. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, we've got a number of approaches we do to really help customers understand their environment. Driving automation into all of this wherever possible is obviously the key here to help with scale. There's lots of tool sets out there that help go and discover an environment. Again, like I was saying earlier, the technology part is generally the easier part, though. So, getting a tool that goes out and scans your environment and understands where your applications are and the dependency mapping and analysis between applications and servers, that's all good. That's all good information, and we do that and bring that in. But the harder information, and often what makes the bigger difference, is that soft information that's harder to gather. And that we find that's key in this whole migration journey, extracting that information from the application owners, understanding, which applications are actually due to be retired, because there's really no point in spending, a couple of months planning the migration of an application that you discover is actually going to be retired in 4 months' time. Then that's just a waste of time. So, but you wouldn't have discovered that if you just done the automated tool and found those servers and went, well, let's start moving that application. The kind of business priorities in an application, when is unacceptable downtime, is that 3-month period, business critical, whether it's month end or year end for a finance application or whatever, then that's a blackout zone. You cannot move it at that time. So all of that kind of information needs to be gathered and combined with the technical information. So we're using tools that do that to really build a much fuller business case, and then identify the risk versus benefits of different approaches. So yeah, there might be higher cost, effort, and risk in modernizing application ABC, But if the business value at the back of that is going to be enormous and it's going to be worth it and it's going to generate dollars for you rather than just cost dollars, then it's probably worth it. But if it's a low priority application that isn't really business critical or offering huge business value, then it isn't worth the risk of doing that. And it might be just a retain, it might be a retire, as Mary said, or it might just be a rehost, lift and shift, leave it as it is, but get the benefit of cloud. And understanding that full end-to-end experience is the most important part.
And Gordon, one thing I'd like to add, when you talked about, you've got to really talk to the application owners. One of the things we find often that automated discovery doesn't pick up is what we would call shadow IT. So where teams have, put a few servers over here, and they've got this app running that's kind of important to the business, but nobody really knows about it. And so really interviewing those business owners and understanding what they're using, sometimes you uncover other assets that you didn't expect.
Yeah, and the number of times I've uncovered macros or businesses running on spreadsheets, and that's a business critical what that spreadsheet is a business critical application. And yeah, again, that's another prime example of moving that to some kind of serverless technology or low-code technology hosted in cloud. Can add huge resilience to that business process that was shadow, as you say, completely hidden, and offer a huge benefit that wasn't being factored in at all before.
I think the key thing here is you need to adopt an application-centric approach to migration, and spot the business value, the priorities, and the dependencies, and then plan that at the right time when the business allows. I think that's general consensus. Fantastic. So I just wanted to, you mentioned earlier, Mary, that there was cost of migration, and I'm fully aware as my role as the AWS Alliance Manager, there's AWS and SoftwareONE are able to help customers with that cost of migration. Would you be able to give us an overview on that, please?
Sure, love to. As I talked earlier, right, this migration methodology really is part of what we call our migration acceleration program. You hear us sometimes refer to it as MAP, but really it's a comprehensive program of cloud migration strategies along with funding to help offset what we often sometimes refer to as the double bubble, where you're in the process of moving to the cloud, but you're still running on-prem. So it offers you discounts to really help offset some of that. Also, when we talk about this, business readiness of experiences mobilized, it offers some funding there to help reduce the cost of that. So you're paying half of what that will cost, and we and partners like SoftwareONE are investing in the other half to help you be successful and get moving quickly. We also offer other programs that deal with licensing, some of the other cost reductions. There's database freedom, which helps you get off databases. So there's lots of programs baked into this that help offset some of this cost as you're going across this journey.
Great, thanks. And I will encourage anyone who wants to know more to reach out to SoftwareONE, and we'll be able to help you figure out the right funding option. Okay, so I think just quickly. As we sort of talked about, pandemic has caused a huge adoption of public cloud. 70% of organizations really seeing the benefit of that and planning to use more public cloud services in the future. Anyone who's reacted at haste last year should really focus on looking at a well-architected review to figure out how they adopt best practice, balance that with security, cost, and performance, so that they got the right service for their applications. And then anyone that's looking to migrate new workloads this year, the critical workloads, SAP, critical Windows applications, looking at how to approach that. Rehosting can most definitely add quick cost, return on investment benefits, but replatforming to manage databases or taking a longer term approach of refactoring can also add significant benefits. And what we really felt is that the move to managed service, so the move to an application-centric approach is most definitely the best option for customers. So as I invited at the start, we've had a couple of questions come in to the chat. If anyone has any questions they'd like to ask to Mary or Gordon, please, now's the time to submit them, but I'll just pick up on a couple that came in the meantime. Mary, I think one of what questions come in is like, what about the cultural impacts of organizational change around, the migration plan? What would you advise for stakeholders to do around that culture perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. It's more than just training, right? You definitely can train people, but it's really the application. And one of the approaches we really follow with our recommend for our customers is build what we call a skills guild, where you create these centers of excellence, or really more, I hate that term, but more about cloud enablement engines, right, that help you accelerate that. And so as part of that cultural journey, if you have those skills teams, they're really building the specialization, helping people understand how they move to the role. I've seen some organizations do a bit of gamification, creating a little bit of who's got the most certifications and setting goals. Those are kind of fun sometimes to get people engaged in that. And the other thing is just getting their teams engaged in the work. We, within our mobilize strategies, we use something we call experience-based accelerators. And what that does is a very immersive program where, over the course of the week, the teams are cross-collaborating, getting work done, getting applications moved, and it really creates that culture of working together and removes the silos. So those are some key ways we see, kind of breaking down a bit of the silos, but also helping the cultural change take place.
Gordon, I don't know if you've got a perspective on that as well, being on both sides of the fence.
Sorry, I'll unmute myself before I answer. Yeah, so I agree with everything Mary said there. Cloud Center of Excellence is in many ways a horrible term. It's very ivory tower. It gives the wrong impression and really doesn't promote collaboration. So when I was on that side of the desk, working in an end user organization, we very much avoided that term. It's about building collaboration and bringing people along in the journey. The whole idea of DevOps as well, and trying to bring the two sides of that historical divide together is hugely beneficial. So, definitely get your teams working together. Those teams that historically have been siloed, trying to cross-pollinate that knowledge is going to be hugely beneficial moving to a cloud operating model. And there's lots of ways to do that. If nothing else, I would definitely recommend everybody reads the Phoenix Project, which is a great resource to understand how organizations can work together in a DevOps way in a nice, easy to consume novel format. But yeah, cultural change, don't underestimate it. It's definitely the bigger part of the change that's needed.
Right. Got a pointed question. So how would I get started moving SAP to the cloud? Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm not an SAP expert. I'll say that for starters, and not many of us are, and that's, I think, the main point. So the first thing is it shouldn't be underestimated. SAP is a business critical application. It absolutely can run in a public cloud. We've got a number of customers that are doing that, and speaking to customers on a daily and weekly basis with that transition. But it's not just any other workload. It's not just a lift and shift and it'll be fine type approach. It needs to be carefully considered. And that's why in our teams, we've got a team that's dedicated specifically to critical workloads. Everybody in that team is SAP certified and is AWS certified, so that they can understand how to run that specific workload on that platform. So it's a very specialized team. So yeah, it's about planning properly, again, understanding the implications, understanding how a workload of that size and scale actually does operate on a public cloud platform, and the differences and nuances there that need to be taken into account. So it's, there are definitely some workloads that any organization could just say, actually, I'm just going to try and move this myself and get it on there. I would say SAP is not one of those.
Yeah. And similarly within AWS, we have a specialty team that focuses on SAP and working closely with our partners on doing that, because it's different. It's business critical. It is a very important system to many parts of the business. And so we look at it the same way, that you need specialists that can help guide you in the journey. We've done hundreds of them as well. And so it's definitely something that can be moved like any other critical workload. You just need to put the right planning in place.
Absolutely. Great. Okay, well, thanks. I think that's probably all the time we've got for questions today. So I just want to thank everyone for listening today. I'd like to especially thank Mary and Gordon for participating as our guest speakers today. If I just summarize, the pandemic's clearly validated the cloud's value proposition, both from a ramp up and ramp down and increasing agility perspective. So, as we look to 2021, I encourage all organizations to figure out what workloads would be best fit by moving into the cloud. Now, before I just close the webinar, I just want to say thank you to everyone, and would ask you to just continue, stay with us for a moment and just complete the survey. We'd be keen to get your thoughts and perspectives, and also let us know if you would like to discuss a cloud readiness assessment or any questions about the funding programs. Again, thanks to Mary and Gordon, and I wish everyone a good day. Thank you.